Welcome to Let's Talk on Spritz TV. I am Bishan Kumar. Today we have Rajesh Mishra, COO of Pernod Ricard India with us. Rajesh has a very long and distinguished career in alcohol industry. He spent more than 2 decades in the sector, and he is a Pernod Ricard veteran. Before taking over as CEO of the company, he was CFO, handling multiple responsibilities. Now his responsibilities have gone bigger. Welcome to Let's Talk on Spritz TV, Rajesh.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me here. Thank you so much. It's a privilege.
Every new role comes with new challenges, and heading a company as CEO of the size of Pernod Ricard must have higher level of challenges. So how are you dealing with them, and what's your plan for the company?
So, as you say, I think it's a privilege to be part of such an esteemed organization. And when I say it, I mean it. And this sense of privilege, you don't see only in me. If you get a chance to meet anyone in the organization, doesn't matter at what level you work, everyone takes an extreme pride to be part of the organization called Pernod Ricard. There is a as a saying goes, there is a Pernod Ricard way of doing business. I think this is what we managed to establish in last probably 25 plus years that we have been in the organization. And as you say, I think because the business is evolving, and most importantly, I think so every business will have its own challenges. Unfortunately for the humankind, I think this challenge is getting compounded because we have just seen the Black Swan event. I think this crisis, which is both, I think, humanitarian as well as economic, of this mammoth magnitude, which is almost, I think, unheard of in human memory. So, and still we are not out of it. Still, I believe this COVID is still a story with very unclear ending till the time it becomes like a normal flu and influenza. So when you are into this kind of a situation, of course, it does create a very different kind of a challenge for any industry. So we are not different than anyone else. And I think, as you say, the biggest, I would say, the priority which is for everyone, including us, is to actually how to learn to live with this crisis, because this is not going to end anywhere. And because of the entire nature of this crisis, okay, some of the and because what it has done to lot many people, because people behavior has undergone a change, that is bound to have the impact on the demand pattern, on the consumer reaction. There's bound to have the impact the way organizations' internal journey go through. So these things do keep a challenge, and we will find a way to cope with it.
So you have taken over as a COO of this company not very long back, I think 6 months back in April. Yeah. So what are your priorities now as a COO of the company?
Interesting question, because I never thought about it, frankly speaking. Because for me, priorities do not change because your designations change, or because your level of hierarchy changes, and so on and so forth. I think the priority for me doesn't matter what chair I was and what I will be. My priority has been, at least when I was doing a CFO role, or whether I do this role, is to co-pilot a CEO, okay, in creating sustainable value for all our stakeholders. Okay, and this we do this is the core of our business model, and when we say that create a sustainable value for all our stakeholders, the definition of a stakeholder, it starts employee first. Then of course there are our consumer, our business partners, our society, and then of course the people who invest money for us. And this we have been doing. This is the only way we know how to do a business. This we have been doing only through ensuring that our growth is sustainable, cash efficient and profitable. So for us, growth is not a one word with a 4-letter. Okay. For us, the growth always mean it has to be sustainable, cash efficient, profitable growth. My priority has been that we never lose sight of this fundamental principle. Okay. And of course, there are definitions what we mean by profitable. So being profitable means that our profit or the return on the capital has to be a certain multiple of our cost of capital. It is not only delta of cost of capital, but certain multiple of cost of capital, which is ability to generate that cash flow. When we say cash efficient, means at least our cash conversion ratio should be above 90-95%. If you look at the entire business ecosystem, you will find many companies creating a lot of value, and for simplicity's sake, I equate value by ability to generate your top line, but they do not capture any value. So people confuse that creating value is synonymous to being a valuable company. Many companies create massive value, but they are no more valuable. So airline is a good example. They create a massive value, but you can just see how valuable they are. As a part of leadership team, my priority would always be that we always remain a valuable company. That means we know the art of capturing the value from whatever maximum value that we are creating. Of course, this pandemic, as I say, it always reoriented, resets a little bit of our priorities. And for the sake of time, if I try to summarize here top 3, for example, I think first thing I would say that what is the most difficult thing in a business? Generally, people say that most difficult thing in a business is to create an advantage over others. Okay, but for me, and therefore create your uniqueness within the industry you're part of. For me, I think there is a thing which is even difficult than this. It is not only creating the advantage, it is how about sustaining that advantage. How about not losing the advantage that you have created? How not losing that uniqueness that you have created, and understand before anyone else that you are on the verge of losing that advantage, you are on the verge of losing that uniqueness, and reconfigure your organization and yourself to create a different uniqueness, a different advantage. The second learning, which is again re-emphasizing that fundamental muscle that organizations needs to build, organization and executives both needs to build to actually survive and thrive for generations, is this existential flexibility. Do not get too married
to your ideas,
to your ideas, your conviction, as you find a little bit in the Buddhism where they say that why it is important to have a beginner's mind. Generally, people say that we are a successful company. Success has its advantage. There is no two ways about it. But success has a massive disadvantage. Okay, it has a very nasty tendency where actually it increases your ability. It doesn't increase your ability. Actually, it increases your confidence. This is the pitfall of a success, and and if your success has some link with some sort of stupidity, then probably this problem gets compounded more. Now, the problem of success is that the moment you become successful, you stop doing those very things that make you successful.
Yeah, I think the complacency also sets in when you reach that level.
Yeah. So I think it will always remain a priority that we do not forget what has made us successful. So I think this will always remain a priority, that despite being a large company, how we ensure that heart of young companies is still alive. We remain nimble-footed. We remain as humble as we were. We keep our willingness to fail much more than anyone else. We keep much more empathy with our customers and with our consumer, rather than anyone else who is trying to compete with us. And probably we communicate slightly more deeply with our employees, and so on and so forth. And the most important piece which this pandemic has actually taught, the third piece is the need for the organization actually to enhance your employee experience. Because this pandemic, I think one of the pitfall of this pandemic was that employees are actually overwhelmed and exhausted. You may see that probably because of vaccination, at least or at least things are improving, and probably there is some organizations which are moving towards a flexible working. Some organizations where the expectation is that the entire workforce come back to the work. So as an organization, how do you ensure that whatever employee expectations are and what the employer expectations are, they're not too different? Okay, and therefore creating that kind of an employee experience, in my view, where the employees are actually too much hungry for the social cohesion, and at the same time they also expect a right balance between, say, a digital and a physical ecosystem, so that at least this elusive work-life balance they can get. So I think here is a time for every organization actually to bring a fundamental shift the way you were looking your workplace solutions, and come back to I would say, a fundamental design principle to actually enhance your employee work experience, so that employee feel that they are being heard. They feel that employer or we as a company is actually taking a deep interest and a genuine interest in creating those interventions we can actually optimize their satisfaction and then help them to improve their productivity and in the performance. I think these three will remain fundamental priority for me, which actually comes from this pandemic.
So what has been your learning experience through these 1.5 years? A lot of brands, companies change their route through which they wanted to connect with the end consumers. What has been Pernod's experience in this regard, and what changes strategy vis-a-vis brands and to connect with your right target people you resorted to?
If you ask me, the what would have been the biggest learning in this pandemic, there are a few things. I think the most important learning is the realization, and hopefully it is not only for us. I think everyone who has a responsibility of running an organization will realize that these kind of interruptions or this kind of I would say a crisis, the magnitude may differ, but I think the interruptions are, I would say, a normal business event. If you look at you go back either last 10 year or 5 year or 20 year, you will find that at every interval of 3 to 5 years, some kind of a disruptions keeps happening. Magnitude might be different. So even if you go back and start from 97, so you can see Asian financial crisis, then the dot-com bubble, then there's a financial crisis, then 2013, again the China thing happening. Coming back to India, there's a demonetization and so on and so forth. Things will keep happening. The only thing probably what happened with this event was it was a mammoth magnitude. So this is the realization that every leader need to have, that what you call is a VUCA moment, an uncertain moment. It is not a lip service. It's a reality of the business. Okay, this is a fundamental. And if you recognize this reality, then the organization needs to understand some of the muscles that you need to develop. Okay, and the fundamental muscle that, in my view, the organization needs to develop, where you can sail through this kind of event without causing too much of a scar on your body, is to developing what I call is a existential flexibility. So where is how, if there is a crisis, do you really have the ability to really reshape your entire business model? Okay, because these kind of a crisis and what we faced, it has a potential to create a structural uncertainty, which is very different from a day-to-day operational uncertainty or a geopolitical or climate uncertainty fundamental. And I hope, my sense is that large part of the business will actually understand, and then probably there is a work to be done, because the developing existence flexibility doesn't come in a day. It requires different muscle. The second most, I think, the important learning that we got, and it's personally for me, I think it's a realization that today you're living in a world where everyone says you are moving into an automated world. Everything, every decision making, every ways of working is getting automated day by day. But when you face something like this, okay, then you realize the value of unautomatable skill and competency. Okay, so hopefully when we talk after a few years and when we look back and when we have the privilege of hindsight, and you try to see that which are the organizations or entities that emerge much stronger versus when they entered in this crisis. And if you start pinpointing what is it that has actually enabled them to do that, you will realize that they were privileged or lucky, whatever you want to say, to have some of the people who has this unautomatable skill and the competency. And my sense is that going forward, I think the definition of talent will undergo a massive change. Because as the world realizes that the ability to handle crisis in a regular interval is actually a necessity of doing a business, then you need to find a very proper balance between the automatable skill and unautomatable skill. And unautomatable skill is not so easy to find. So it will reshape and redefine, in my view, the definition of a talent. That's the way I say it. And the third most, I think, it was humbling experience and learning is, which generally you have the sense, but unless until you experience it, you don't realize it. You can really see that what are the new possible you can create through your employees. Generally, people underestimate the ability of your employees to actually rise up to the occasion and actually bring such a massive contribution in handling this kind of a crisis. Okay, it is not just the few leaders of the organizations actually which enables organization to really sail through and emerge much stronger. It was very heartening to see that some of the attributes that large part of the employee in a very different corners of the geography spanning across the hierarchy level, the way they adopt, the way they rise up to the occasion, and they create something which was unimaginable before this crisis hit. So that's the way I would like to sum up.
I agree with you. Such situations always throw new leadership, and the hidden talents also surfaces most of the time. During this time, if you call them the pandemic surviving population now, people who survived are lucky to be here still with us. Do you see that because during the lockdown times, there are a lot of access to data, there was massive consumption of digital data during that time. There was access to information, what's happening. People are very particularly inclined towards drinking certain specific brands. They have option to explore more. So this 18 months, and when the lockdown opened and the shops opened and there was limited stock available, people went for a new kind of brands. Did it anyway affects the sale and prospects of any Pernod Ricard brands?
As I say, that 18 months broadly is a very long period of a time to change human behavior. And I think this was also a time for us to actually validate the resilience of our business model. And probably it was very humbling and experience actually to see the consumer behavior after the restrictions start opening up and so on and so forth. I think we really feel very humbled the kind of loyalty that the consumer have shown last 25 years, but the kind of loyalty that they have shown after this opening of this lockdown. What I think it was extremely surprising for us, the stickiness of the consumer to our franchise. We were also hoping that hopefully when the things will open up, probably you will see some kind of a tapering down or some kind of a consumer shifting from one brand to other brand. But I think fortunately for us, it was very, I would say, a pleasant and a positively surprised experience to see the stickiness and the loyalty of the consumer towards our brand. I think the growth of our portfolio and especially the premium portfolio, what we have seen, I think is unprecedented. We never expected this to happen, and probably this tells you that probably what is it that we owe to our consumer. Why this also I think reaffirms the belief why it is important to stay true to your commitment to your consumer, what we have done in the last 25 years, and I think here is the time for us to take it to the next level. But to answer the question, did we see a consumer drifting away? I think the answer is emphatic no, and it was a very big positive surprise for us, the kind of a premiumization trend that we see and the kind of a growth of our portfolio that we see.
But must have reviewed the performance of certain brands during this period, because a lot of time at your disposal. Your team must have gone through that, the performance of different brands in different markets in India. India is not one single market; it's a different markets and different regions. So, which brands you think need more push now, post pandemic? Which brands are doing phenomenally well? If you could name a few, give some case studies, that would be wonderful.
Look at this way, that one of the fundamental, I would say, a tenet of our doing business, we are never a push company. We are a pull company. Okay, and it is not. I'm saying it today because we are an organization of a certain size and a certain stature and a certain market share. I'm talking about those days, and because I'm lucky enough and I have a privilege enough to be part of the organization as a startup. Mm. So I'm talking about from those days. When we were like a drop in the ocean. Even from those days, we were very clear that we will never ever be a push company. We will always be a pull company. Okay, so you will not find anything in our portfolio. I say this with a lot of humility that within the industry, I think we have the most expensive portfolio. I don't think anyone can really come closer to that, which caters to every responsible consumption occasion. And in there's such a massive expensive portfolio that we cater to, there is not a single brand which requires a push. This is you may call it a DNA of the organization, put it this way. So to answer your question, there is no brand which requires a push from our side.
So during this time, the digital route has been very important for the companies. I asked you earlier also, but there has been an overload of data which is reaching out to consumers, and there has to be right balance because people they are feeling a sense of fatigue because of overload. So for the company of your size, the Pernod Ricard size, with lots of massive portfolio, a lot of digital data is being used for the audience purposes, what's the right balance? How do you maintain the right balance?
As I say, that this pandemic has actually helped us to realize few things in a much more emphatic way, which otherwise we would have known. And I think one piece which is very visible, that probably the acceptance for digital technology and digital adoption by the masses. From an internal side, I think we were always pretty ahead in our journey as a digital organization. So it's not that we were waiting for the pandemic to actually start that journey. We were quite ahead. But as you know that kind of industry we are in, I think the digital advertising is not, or any form of consumer direct advertising is not permissible. But we do have our plans, and we do have a very comprehensive strategy and acceleration towards it, where how we actually digitize the entire consumer journey to enhance his consumer experience. Okay, and where we keep an optimal balance, where nothing too much, nothing too less. What we always believe as an organization, and we firmly believe in it, that the ultimate form of persuasion is inspiring a consumer. If you manage to inspire someone and convert them into a follower, there is no need to do too much of a persuasion. Okay, so whatever we do on a brand, okay, it's important that we ensure that all our activity, all our brand positioning, what a brand stands for, that keep inspiring our consumer.
Recently, we heard that UK trade delegation was here. We had a heart-to-heart conversation with Mr. Piyush Goyal, and there was a lot of talks happening about that duties of imported liquor will come down drastically. Do you find feasible the government of India would finally agree to cut down custom duty on imported liquor?
Generally, people talk about that today duty is 150%, and probably it has not been reduced for a long period of a time. If you go back to the history, when I started my career in this industry as a trainee, the duty was 420%. Okay, so from 420%, it came down to 150%. Okay, so as India, it is not about the alcohol. Okay, where I think there is a express commitment from the government that India is part of the global economy. Right, the government will be doing everything possible that is necessary to actually make this economy grow, make the Indian businesses more competitive. So as long as this intention remains, that that government remains committed to create an ecosystem to make Indian businesses more competitive. Okay, and India is a signatory of WTO. This is also a reality. So as long as these two things remain constant, things will only evolve in a positive direction. Now you may ask a question that which is going to happen tomorrow or the next 3 months, next 6 months. I don't think we should be too focused about that time period, but in my view the secular direction would be that ecosystem will get created where you remain competitive, and the prohibitory, I would say, the trade practices will not continue for a long period of time.
So you are hopeful that duties might come down? If not tomorrow, maybe in recent future.
Yes, I think as you say that there is no need to feel pessimistic about anything in India. Everyone, it is a public domain that the FTA conversations are on with Australia, with UK, and so on and so forth, and now UK out of even the European Union. And with this conversation, I think there is a in all fairness, I think one needs to remain hopeful that there will be a common meeting ground which will be meeting the interest of both the nations, India as well as the UK, and which will result into beneficial things for both the countries.
During this pandemic, the biggest sufferers were the hospitality sector, other than aviation, because a lot of people lost their jobs. Most of the companies have come out and helped them, the people in distress. What has been Pernod's role in reaching out to the bartenders, mixologists, and the people during this pandemic? How did you help them?
No, it's true that I think the hospitality was one of the most impacted sector because of all the restrictions, lockdown, people not going out and not enjoying. But as an organization, as a company, one of our ethos are that we always have an interest in the well-being and the happiness society, the way we have interest in ourselves. That's our way of working. So of course hospitality is an industry which is directly related to our business. So obviously we will have an interest and care and a commitment for the well-being of the hospitality industry. And various initiatives that we did were partnering with the NRI for either helping them to vaccination programs or probably providing some support to the bartenders and their families, either for their survival in that period or helping their kids' education and so on and so forth. So lot many stuff that probably we managed to at least we did to at least show that, not to show, but at least to remain true to our commitment that we have an interest because they are the partner for our business, and we have a similar level of, I would say, commitment towards them in their well-being, in their happiness, in the way we have in ourselves.
So now this industry is opening up. Do you see this the alcohol industry reaching to the pre-pandemic time in terms of the sales and consumption patterns? So in your view, when we are going to see that situation reaching out?
Now, if your question is typically for alcohol industry,
absolutely.
As you know, that alcohol is a discretionary spend category, and one thing that has happened in this pandemic, because people were not being able to spend money in lot many activities otherwise they would have. India's saving rate was touched at the peak level. So when the people are getting a chance to actually get out of the home and express their purchasing behavior, I think you will see that most of the discretionary spend category actually is seeing immense, unprecedented amount of growth. Okay, and alcohol is no exception. Alcohol business is no exceptions. And within the alcohol business, the strongest growth that you see in the most premium category. Okay, so if your question is that are we coming closer to pre-pandemic level, probably you will surpass pre-pandemic level by a wide margin. Okay, are we coming closer? Are we coming closer to the premiumization trend, secular premiumization trend? Probably you will surpass that secular premiumization trend with a wide margin. And I think, as you say, that of course the pandemic has its own negative side. It impacts economy, people, and so on and so forth. But as you say, that every crisis creates a massive opportunity. There is always an opportunity in the crisis, and one of the responsibility that I think most of the leaders have is how not to waste that crisis. Okay, where you do not only seize the opportunity that the crisis has created, but the crisis also helps you to create some of those opportunities which otherwise would have never been created. Okay, so at least from a consumption side of it, from a premiumization story side of it, I think we can see that those opportunities has been created, and there are potentials because consumer behaviors is also shifting a lot. Okay, and where the consumers are also more conscious about their brand affinity. They want to associate with the brand which has a purpose, which has the commitment toward the society, which is true to their value proposition. So this is the change that is happening to the consumer behavior, where consumers are looking consumption as an expression of their individual identity. This massive change that is happening in the consumer behavior, which is helping us to create an opportunity which was very difficult to create pre-pandemic. Okay, so when you actually summarize all this, there is a massive opportunity for the companies which has a very expensive portfolio tilted towards premiumization and having a brand with a purpose with which consumer can really relate to and as expression of the individual entity. This is what this crisis has created for that for the companies, and we are I feel privileged and we are probably lucky to be at the right spot to actually maximize this opportunity.
So, to borrow the expression of it's a massive opportunity for the companies. Are we going to see the consumer? I'm asking from consumer side. Are the consumer going to see some new brands being added into a portfolio?
We never look anything from the perspective of either we add a new brand or we delete the new brand. As because of our position in the industry, we always believe that we have a certain responsibility to fulfill because of whatever positions that consumers have brought us to. Okay, and one of the responsibility that we have is to offer consumer what they want. So fundamentally, why we are there? We are here to serve the consumer. So we have a 25 year of history. It's not a lip service. We have shown that how we serve the consumer. Okay, so the fundamental reason we exist for the consumer, as we know that because of the way world is changing and few things are done by the pandemic and so on and so forth, the consumer behavior is also changing, and therefore now you see a new consumer tribes emerging, new consumer behavior emerging, which actually creates a need for a more differentiated offering because consumers are getting more experimental and so on and so forth. So within this realization of needs of the consumer, definitely we will be there with our products which will meet their need. So even if you look at our portfolio, some of the recent introductions, so for example, we know that there is a excitement that is happening in gin category. We know that there is a lot of talks happening in a versatile white spirit category. we know that a lot of conversation happens around the craft side of it. Okay, so these are all interesting. I think these spaces, but but there's also a DNA of our organization where where we venture into something which meets the consumer need. Okay, but at the same time it creates a value for us. So wherever we venture, we will always try and see that does this category has a value creation opportunity, yes or no. That actually decides where we go or we do not go. Because we always have been a company which was never about more consumption. It was from a day one. It is not today. It was from a day one. And whatever you do, it has to create a value for us. So within this realm, then we'll try and explore everything that is evolving, and then we put the offering. So for example, in a gin, if you look at our new offering, which is showing a huge promise, is a Monkey 47. Hopefully, I think. In few months, we may come up with other gin in that category, Malfi. We might be coming it. In a white spirit, you can see our Beefeater gin distilled in London, which is showing a huge promise. Even in our and as I was saying that because of our position in industry and because being a thought leader, we have a responsibility also to create a new category. So if you have seen in last few months, we created a new category which is a blended malt category, Indian blended malt category, which has never existed in this country, and we have a new offering from HP 8, 100 Pipers 8-year blended malt, which is a new category being created. Similarly, we came up with a very new offering in the Oaken Glow, which is a good infusion of a craft and tradition, which is a peated fire smoky whiskey, and which is a product which actually consumer has never experienced. Okay, so to sum up, I think we will always have an offering which will meet a consumer need, evolving consumer need. At the same time, we will be doing our duty also to offering consumers something which they have not expected, and probably which will help them to evolve their need further.
So Rajesh, as a CEO of this massive company, what's your mantra of success?
There's no mantra of success. I think for me, having a right balance between your conviction and humility. I think that is important for any individual, any organization. Okay, so when I say a right balance between your conviction and a humility, which is about your cognitive flexibility, and which is this realization that doesn't matter how strong our convictions are, but there's a possibility that most of the time we will be wrong. Okay, so accept, don't hold on to your belief too firmly. If there are evidence which counters, and there is evidence which suggests that probably that beliefs needs to be modified, have the humility to accept that and modify your belief. Okay, so probably this helps me, and probably I believe if any organization that accepts it, okay, it will help them to actually remain ahead of the curve. Fundamentally, the key of ensuring that your businesses last generations, or executive career that last till the time you want it to last. It is not the ability to transform yourself. It is actually the ability to reinvent yourself and remain ahead of the curve, and that requires significant amount of, I would say, cognitive flexibility, and requires a significant amount of humility. It sounds simple, but it's not easy.
It is not at all.
Yeah.
It is not at all. So Rajesh, in your opinion, what is a responsible business, especially in Alcobeb sector?
I think for us, it's not in my opinion. It has been our position since we started this company in this country. Okay, as I say that for us, a responsible Alcobeb business, every business is for the consumer. That's the fundamental principle of a business. I always remain reminded what even the Adam Smith has said in his famous book Wealth of a Nation. I think which is the fundamental of any capitalism, where it says that the sole purpose of consumption is the sole purpose of any production. Okay, and fundamentally, ultimately, what business does, they should only focus on maximizing the consumer value. Okay, and the producer's value should be maximized only to the extent it is necessary to maximize consumer value. That is the fundamental of the capitalism, and that is how the capitalism have evolved over a period of time. It's a different thing that now it is getting abused and so on and so forth, but there's the fundamental, and we always remain true to this fundamental that we are meant for the consumer, and for the Alcobeb business, for us, the responsible Alcobeb business always means never about more consumption. It is about responsible consumptions in a responsible moments. Because we sell Alcobeb products, and you may call it Alcobeb company, we are actually creator of the conveyability company. So for us, who we are, we create a good relationship, good human relationship. That is who we are. Today, we are creating this good human, strong relationship through enjoyable moment through Alcobeb product. Tomorrow it could be anything else, but fundamentally this is our DNA of the company. So we may people may see from outside as because Alcobeb is a large part of our portfolio, what product we offer, but we are actually a premium experience company. And the fundamental of that premium experience is that you provide that experience either through your product or through your services to your consumer, which helps them to build a very, very strong convivial relationship. This is who we are, and that is what drives everything that we have been doing for last 25 years. That will drive everything that we will do next 25 years.
This is a very interesting interview with Rajesh Mishra, COO of Pernod Ricard India. He left us with a lot of thoughts, and there are a lot of nuggets of wisdom to partake with. It's not every day that we get to meet such a thought leader, very humble person, and very articulate one as well. Rajesh, thank you very much. It's lovely talking to you, and we look forward to meeting you soon again.
Thank you so much, Bishan bhai. I'm so thankful for you to have me here, and it was a great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you.